Meeting to order. First item on the agenda is FFA. I want to thank our visitors for joining us tonight. Perhaps you could do some intros. We're going to go through a presentation.
You bet. Appreciate your time this evening. I'm Scott Johnson, Executive Secretary of the Iowa FFA Association. Work with day-to-day operations for the state organization that consists of 233 FFA chapters in, I honestly can't tell you how many school districts. More than 233 because of some with sharing arrangements between schools, so on and so forth. Sorry about that. With me today is Savannah Keitzer, past state FFA officer and FFA member from Mediapolis. Savannah, I'll give you a couple seconds to introduce and say a little bit more about who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Savannah Keitzer, and I'm originally from Mediapolis, Iowa. Recently made the move to Iowa State University, where I'm studying physical education. This past year, during my freshman year, I served as an Iowa FFA state officer for a whole year, from April to April. I traveled about 9,000 miles on my own personal vehicle across the state of Iowa, interacting with FFA members across the state.
And I'm Bridget Mahoney. I am originally from Williamsburg, Iowa, and I teach in Lone Tree. I'm the high school agriculture instructor and FFA advisor there.
Yes, there we go. So, really, we've got a couple of handouts that we wanted to start with. I ran about a dozen copies, so I'm sorry if we ran short there. Just didn't know to what extent we needed the extra handouts there. The two handouts, the first one I'll direct your attention to is the one that is titled School-Based Agriculture Education on one side, and then National FFA Organization Delivery of the Mission on the other. And I'll start on the three-circle model side, the school-based agriculture education. Delivery of an agriculture education program consists of three components: classroom, laboratory, supervised agricultural experience program, which really is ag education speak for work-based learning, and the FFA, which is a student organization, current technical student organization, or CTSO, that's associated with agriculture education as a current technical education program, one of the 12 CTSOs in the state of Iowa, and actually the largest by membership in the state. The backside of that is what the National FFA mission is, and on the left-hand side are the three pillars of why we do what we do. Premier leadership, personal growth, and career success is embedded in our mission statement. And then why we do what we do to lead towards what our vision is on the right-hand side, which is grow leaders, build communities, strengthen agriculture, which those three pillars of the vision are actually what would lead me to the second handout, which is when you get into the nuts and bolts of an FFA chapter, which is the FFA program or club that's associated with the school, the program activities that is led by and directed and put together by the FFA advisor and the student officers divides up into the three divisions, which are the three components of the mission, or the vision, the grow leaders, build communities, and strengthen agriculture, and there are standards within that. So as far as the structure of what a student organization would look like at a local level, that's a pretty quick snapshot. We intended upon using these handouts as a means of introducing our presentation. We do have a formal presentation put together, but as we were discussing before we came in, we also looked at each other and said, well, what if we spend the next 15 minutes telling them what they already know or can already read and glean through the material, and then basically be not as efficient with our presentation as what we could be. So we do have something formal here to present to you, and we have no hesitation in doing that, but we are also not offended if you really just want to get into the meat and potatoes and the nuts and bolts of questions that you might have, and then some of our answers might come in the form of what we would have presented anyway. So I will actually turn it over to the group as far as providing some informal direction, I guess, on how you would like us to proceed before we just plow through this whole thing out of respect for your time and your agenda tonight.
Can I just ask a question? So who put the memo in on options? Is that you,
Yeah, that was Diane and I worked together there, so that came from our curriculum team about the different options we could pursue as a district.
Was that based on FFA's input, or?
Yeah, that was based on some conversations we had with the FFA team and things we thought were realistic for us to take on.
I don't know where everybody else at, but I know they're just talking about it. So what are the options? You know what I mean? To me, that's my 2 cents.
Just want me to walk through
Okay, so
those?
the options, yep.
Sure.
I don't know if you have a recommendation or not, or you want us to weigh in on one, but yeah, thanks for that.
Right. Well, if you pull up the memo that we prepared for you this evening, you see that we list 4 different options there. I've shared some of these with Phil prior to that as we kind of talked through with some of his passion and interest in this particular area, and tried to take advantage of what potential opportunities might be out there. You see that we listed area schools that have ag, ed, or FFA programs. We also listed the ones that share with each other. And then we also listed ones that don't have an existing program that are close in proximity to us. One thing to note there is that Clear Creek Amana has actually proactively reached out to us here in the last couple of days and said that they're kind of having this same conversation and aren't sure that they could take it on all by themselves, but are looking for a partner and maybe trying to get something off the ground. So there's an opportunity there for us. So when you ask about what is our recommendation, it might actually be a combination of 1, 2, or 3, and trying to think about how do we put something like that together, see what partners are there, and then where do we offer it or how do we offer it. But option 1 just is the flat out begin an ag ed program and FFA chapter through the Iowa City Community School District. I'm sure that's what these guys would provide some more information on what that means and what that would look like, but there's a few bullet points there. I won't read all those to you. The biggest cost as we see it right now, and I'm sure there's probably some additional cost in the second memo provided, is really just securing the teacher and finding somebody with appropriate licensure. We don't have somebody on staff that could currently do that, so we would have to go out and seek and hire that individual, recruit student interest, and get that program off the ground. And is that one instructor shared between 3 high schools? Is that more than one instructor we potentially need to have? I think we'd have to base that on some student interest.
And do you have any data on student interests?
No, that would be part of, if we get some direction from you guys about what to do tonight, I think that would be, my recommendation would be develop some type of a steering committee around this effort, and that would be a critical part, is finding out what community partners we have, what student interest there is in the program, and bringing some of that data back to you to say, do we think there's is there enough viable support to continue this?
Yeah, it starts out there.
Right. So option 2 just talks about investigating the possibility of sharing with another district that has an established program. So that would be talking about a Lone Tree or a Solon that's sharing with West Branch, trying to go to one of those that already has an existing program. I think if you take a kind of a tweak on that one, it'd be more looking at something like Clear Creek. Maybe they don't even have an existing program, but they're interested, or they formerly had a program and be interested in bringing it back. So it really just speaks to the concept of partnership there. Option 3 talks about trying to take advantage of the regional center. There's been conversations in my meetings with them about is ag education something that could be offered in that space. Phil and I have had several conversations about the limitations that potentially could be there from the idea we know when kids have to be transported out to the regional center, they lose scheduling chunks of their day, and the transportation, even though we provide transportation, it just isn't as flexible as it would be having it on a campus. But again, trying to manage 3 high schools, what is our option about where we could offer that and what's the most realistic thing to get off the ground. So just a couple pieces to consider there. Cost could be maybe a little bit more of a win in that scenario, as they could be more manageable based on the enrollment that way, instead of having an instructor spread across 3 campuses. And then the fourth one would be looking at more workplace learning options to include ag placements. As I've talked to some other people about this one, this might just be something we should do anyways. It might not be an option to satisfy the end or the wishes of the board here, but if we weren't going to start a full FFA program, or even if we decide that's what the direction we want to go, is how do we get kids more hands-on learning experiences in those environments and potentially try to seek out more of those opportunities. We do some of that in the report you're delivered from Workplace Learning Connections when we sign their contract every year, but there's definitely more experiences we could probably take advantage of there. So when you ask for a recommendation, my recommendation would be, before we commit to anything, that we would develop some type of a group. We'd dig into this further. We'd determine some of the community interest, the student interest in these programs, and then come back to you with a solution that will also allow us some time to seek out some partners, whether it's business, industry, or local school districts that we could match up with. But if you want to hear more specifically about what a program looks like, I'm sure that's where these guys' expertise would come in.
I like your recommendation. I feel bad though if we have them here.
Right.
I'm going to bring it back a second time.
Right.
So can you give us
Well, it actually kind of helped out. We had some state events up at Kirkwood today. So the round trip to Cedar Rapids was already happening. So the little diversion to Iowa City was happened to work out just kind of by luck of the draw. And of course, in Bridget's case, being in the area is always helpful. Savannah wasn't too far away. Really, as far as scratching across the surface, on the options that you've discussed, I get approached probably anywhere from 4 to 5 up to half a dozen times per year. After State Fair, it tends to be a popular time where we get these questions. And it's usually in the form of, how do I get FFA in the school? And it's like, okay, now I got to open this can of worms and explain how all this works in terms of what a program looks like. And probably one of the challenges to start with is, particularly in Iowa, ag education FFA has kind of this label stereotype as it's a rural school program. Iowa City obviously isn't a rural school. We're all very aware of that. And in reality, when you look across the country, school systems like Chicago, Minneapolis, Kansas City, Philadelphia have ag education FFA programs. Granted, much larger school districts where they can have academies specific to that area. But sometimes part of the clarification is just making sure we kind of identify how much non-production content is involved and opportunities that are involved in our programs, because we frankly don't have a lot of students that are farm kids, if you will. And actually, Bridget, do you want to maybe touch on kind of what you have as a snapshot? Yeah, I'll advance to that slide.
I'll just talk to you a little bit about Lone Tree's program. I've been at Lone Tree, going into my 7th year there. We have approximately 100 kids in the high school, so nothing compared to Iowa City. That is 9 through 12, 100 kids. So they're very different atmosphere, but that being said, most of my students are not your typical farm kids. I have maybe a handful, 6 maybe, that actually grow up on a farm or work directly on a farm. I don't have very many farm kids, so that stereotype is very loosely used these days. But I have a very high FFA membership. That being said, I have about 70 members in my chapter out of the 100 students that we have. I do have students that come over from Highland, which are included in that 70, and I have a couple of students that are homeschooled and come to Lone Tree specifically for an ag class and to be part of the FFA chapter, since they have to take an ag class to be an FFA member.
And
Go ahead.
no, do you want to go with this, or do you want to? I can go back to like the STEM slide with
Yeah, sure.
Savannah. So, Savannah, you want to share kind of your perspective as a student in terms of what you kind of learned in the classroom?
So I'm going to talk about the big, hot curriculum that's out right now for agricultural education, which is called CASE, which goes off of STEM, which is the big initiative that the governor is pushing right now. And what was really cool is I got to experience this curriculum kind of on the side of, I'm now a freshman at Iowa State University. We studied it a little bit and got to dive in from the teacher standpoint, but I also got to experience it as a student. And I was really intrigued by the hands-on experience that we did, whether it was dissection or welding or just the skills that I gained in that aspect and the wide variety that it offered. And then one cool thing that I got to experience is as a state officer this past year, I got to sit in a meeting with Miss Reynolds and have a conversation about STEM and almost be on a first-name basis with the woman behind the initiative of this Greatness Stems from Iowa. So.
Just the science-based curriculum that Savannah kind of alluded to, and the idea of inclusion in terms of the opportunity in ag-based content for students hopefully kind of shows that we would hope that there are students interested. When I get approached from patrons of school districts or board members or administrators, we understand that in a school budget, your budget's a pie chart. You're trying to figure out if you're going to start something new, it's another slice of pie that's got to try to fit in there someplace that you're trying to prioritize, and those are tough decisions. So those are processes that don't happen quickly. There are processes that involve some homework and collection of some data and some information. It's you're talking 1 to 2 year process. And sometimes when I get communication from, say, parents or constituents of school districts, it's a parent that's asking, hey, my son or daughter was a junior, I really want him to be an FFA. And I got to be real with them and say it's probably not going to happen. And those of you that are involved, obviously, here tonight, you understand that when it comes to school finance and project planning and how you set priorities and direction for the vision and mission of the school district. Some points to kind of hit on, finding somebody that's properly licensed is probably the biggest challenge. One wrinkle that helps that, and I alluded this in communication with Diane at one point, is since about 2005 or so, graduates from Iowa State University in ag education are also endorsed to teach biology. So there is a pretty close link to science instruction where, smaller schools are usually approaching us looking at the CTE standards in the state, being able to offer 3 sequential units in 4 of the 6 service areas, which establishing that program might have an impact on funding related to federal Perkins or state CTE reimbursement or whatever that is. However, the option could be more realistic for schools that have a larger enrollment, larger science departments, where ag education isn't necessarily a standalone CTE service area, but rather it's a component that's embedded within your science curriculum in your science department, kind of as a subdivision, if you will. And I know that that's easier said than done. I can stand up here and preach to you and say, hey, here's your classes, here's your teachers, shift the things around and and tell your teachers to teach something different. And we all know that that's not how that works. We're in the people business here, and having buy-in from staff and understanding that, and understanding the opportunities. The students understand the opportunities, so they even know what they're committing to if they're asked the question, are you interested in X or Y? So we've had some other conversations, not in a formal work session like this, with at least one other school district, and we were involved in the metro area, the Des Moines metro area, that we were involved in a couple of survey questions as they were looking at direction as they were moving with their school district in construction of a new high school, so kind of in process there. So I understand there's an information gathering process that's a part of that, if a school district chooses to pursue and look at options and opportunities that are there. I don't know if that came close to answering anybody's questions, but
I think the one understanding that sometimes, at least I've heard from some people, the misconception about FFA and then the ag classes. Could you guys just talk about kind of the outside of school component and then the inside of school component, just so we have a solid understanding of that?
Yeah, so for a student to be an FFA member, they have to be enrolled in at least 1 semester of an ag course to be a member for that year. So students can be members from until they're 21 years old. So their membership lasts after high school. So it's not, Savannah is still a member. She's at Iowa State University. Is that kind of what you were getting at?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So
the link between the two.
Yep. And then the third component that Scott was talking about was the SAE, the workplace learning. Students are asked to have some sort of project that they can call their own and work on, whether that is gardening or if there is a farm available to work on. Service learning, I think Savannah had, do you want to click to that SAE slide? And so all 3 of these components are intertwined within the classroom. Instead of being extracurricular, maybe like a speech or something, a speech club or something like that, FFA is actually intracurricular. So we do talk about FFA and leadership and SAEs, the workplace learning in the classroom, and how those can be applied outside of the classroom. How are you going to use this after you graduate high school? How are you going to use this when you start contributing to your community? And up here, we have just the different options for students' workplace learning, their SAEs, anywhere from owning a project to their service learning. For example, I have a student who is super passionate about community service. That is he ties it to agriculture. That is his SAE. We had our own, what we call a hunger service day, and we packaged 36,000 meals, all because one student decided he wanted to find one simple way to do a community service project. And so he worked on that all year. That was his work-based learning project.
Does that have any cost to be a member?
State and national membership dues combined for $14.50 annually. The state FFA Association also has a chapter fee. It's an additional charge to each program that ranges from $85, I think it is, to $300, and it's a tiered status based on membership within the program. And it's a means of not increasing individual student dues and giving the local program flexibility to determine how they want to be able to do that instead of locking it into the individual student. Recognizing that students come from a variety of socioeconomic statuses. And there's a cost of doing business, but how do you balance that with trying to provide the opportunity for the student to be involved? I spent just about 10 years teaching in Western Iowa, and for students that were in that kind of situation, one of the unique things is, as part of a component to the program, is community involvement and community support and local patrons that will willingly step forward and say, all right, you have a student that can't afford to go someplace, you say the word and it's covered, as they're trying to not be restrictive to those students to be involved. And even in a small school where students might be involved in way too many opportunities because they're all there, and there isn't competition or tryouts or whatever for other activities, there are still those students who aren't connected to some of the other activities, if it's associated with speech or music or athletics or whatever that is, and they find a hook or a niche or a link to being involved in FFA, and their background may or may not have anything to do with production agriculture. And that's actually, there's some fine print on this spectrograph that I handed out. And this is actually something that, as far as propaganda, I really shouldn't be showing you, because if you read it and try to interpret it, if you can read the fine print, it actually doesn't help us if you take it at face value. And the spectrograph is a link that shows on the left side the academic programs, and on the right side categories of entries into the workforce. And somewhere on the upper left, there's an orange band that's labeled agriculture. And that shows the number of students, an estimated an enrollment of students that come out of that program, and then it shows in lines where they go in the career area. And at surface value, you can look at that and say, we're already producing more students with these qualifications than what industry can support. Why would we want to add this? Because that's not in the best interest of the future of our students. We don't want to prepare them for a career area that doesn't exist. And the reality is how workforce development, federal level and state level, defines certain careers. A lot of ag-based fall under the other areas that are on that spectrograph. Marketing, finance, manufacturing, so on and so forth. So using John Deere as an example, there are very, very few careers and jobs at John Deere that are actually classified as agriculture. It's all within their information systems or their manufacturing or finance or whatever that is. It goes under the other career components as they are categorized. What they do value is the agricultural knowledge, the basic agricultural knowledge and background. And let's be realistic. In my position, nobody from business and industry, for the most part, is going to approach me and say, hey, I really don't like all of these things that FFA is doing. I can only give you the anecdotal stories that I hear from business and industry partners that approach me that are usually not complaining about it. They're usually providing some good comments and praising some of the things that we're doing. And one of the things that fits under the general theme that I hear for compliments is the combination of the agricultural base of knowledge and learning and content and application of skill with the student leadership experience from those that are involved in FFA as a CTSO. That combination of basic educational principles within that industry with that ability to communicate with subordinates, communicate with superiors, the institution of the process, understanding policy and procedure, financial literacy, gained through record keeping with their supervised ag experience programs. Those are things that advance students prepare them for the workforce, regardless of where they go.
So exactly, Scott. Essentially what we're trying to do is flip your statement on its head, right? Is that we're trying to give students the soft skills to prepare them for jobs that aren't there yet, because that's what they're going to have to be able to adapt to and be ready to position themselves in, whether it's called ag or something else.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of what I've seen from FFA is all those other soft skills they acquire along the way,
Yeah.
plus the agriculture piece.
Every year at the end of June at Ag Ed Conference, so in a couple of weeks here, Mike Gall with the Career Services Department at Iowa State within the College of Agriculture will give an update. What their job placement rate is of graduates, so on and so forth, which I think for over 20 years now has been over 95%, 97, 98%, through whatever economic, ups and downs that it goes through. And usually, he'll address the question, well, what is it that, and what I like about this is he gives an update to our high school ag education instructors. So those that are working with high school students every day, get this update from post-secondary about what should we be working on? Is it this content knowledge, that content knowledge? And by and large, when they have their career fairs in the fall, and 2 of the top 5 career fairs in all of the College of Agricultures across the country are at Iowa State in the spring and the fall, communicate with these industry leaders and representatives that come to the career show. What is it that you're looking for? Communication, teamwork, and they rattle off a bunch of skills, none of which are specifically content-based. Very rarely do you hear about, well, I really wish that they were better experts at GPS or with genetic engineering or whatever it is. And the reality is, yes, the content knowledge is nice, but every company has a certain way of doing things. We need them to have the ability to learn, to have that skill set, to be humble enough to know when to ask the question, to know who to ask the question to know when to make the decision on your own. Those are experiences you pick up when you coordinate events as a student. You work with classmates or FFA members on a team, or you communicate with and collaborate with alumni or community community groups on projects or partnerships or whatever that is. And those are life experiences that prepare students for that situation.
Questions about how sharing between districts work. So if one of the oppositions of having it at the Kirkwood Regional Center here is transportation of kids in missing classes, how does Lone Tree, the Highland kids they come to Lone Tree then?
Mm-hmm. So my Highland students come to Lone Tree. In order for them to do that, they have to miss 2 periods for one of my periods. So generally speaking, these are students who know that they want to at least try out agriculture at least their freshman year. And then if they continue doing it, they really have to plan their schedules, saying, okay, I know I'm going to miss at least 1 class or 2 classes every year for 1 ag class.
I think one thing we've tried to do, like if you look at that ACE program at City, is how do you build a continuum? So as we're trying to look at these end, if you see the Kirkwood Regional Center as kind of the end academy, the end activities, what are those entry-level experiences we can give them on campus to maybe introduce them, and then the Ag Academy could be an end part too. So we wouldn't have to necessarily look at as we explore this the whole range of options being on campus, but is there a way you can do both? That there's something maybe as an end result at the regional center and something that introduces them to it on campus.
Well, and I'm first I want to thank everybody for being here and giving this presentation. One of the things for me is that we've got to get these opportunities into the 5-minute bell schedule for our students and overcome that regional center problem. And if we were to partner with Clear Creek and our instructor and with an instructor, essentially I'm assuming the instructor could spend some time at our schools and then possibly go over to Clear Creek and then teach there. I've encountered just a lot of support from county supervisors. 3 of the 5 I've spoken to about FFA. They're all on board about this, and in fact, there could be some opportunities with partnership with the county at the pork farm. They're lobbying with the city to get livestock out there. Now that's just right down the road from West High, so there'd be opportunities there doing that. I think in a growing district such as ours, and I'm encouraged by, we're always looking at getting kids in activities, and if you've got 70% participation in 100 student high school in a certain activity, that encourages me. And I know when I was at the state convention, I was just amazed at the percentage of female participation. I took vocational agriculture at West Branch. I was not in FFA, I was in 4-H and farming at the time. So time limitations didn't get into that. And after being at the convention, I regret, I see that as a mistake that I made. But I was just amazed at the participation. Now, am I right in saying that the leadership nationally and in the state is 80% female or close to that?
A lot of the leadership positions, not quite to 80, run about 60 to 70%
Okay.
female. The big conversation now is the farm crisis in the 80s had an impact on membership where it kind of drove the organization to say, hey, if we're not more inclusive here, we're not meeting the needs of youth across the country. So a 25-year continuum of membership has shown basically male membership involvement has been pretty steady. The growth has actually been in the female membership over the years where we've had recent years of record membership, 650,000 members last year across the country. Iowa FFA is at record membership this year at 14,900. National FFA has been at about a 54% male, 46% female membership percentage for about the last 3 years, so almost 50-50. And honestly, their bigger concern or challenges now are the disparity in race between the instructors in the classroom, which are 93% white, Caucasian, non-Hispanic, and 7% other minority groups, versus a membership that is not that way. It's still 60 to 70% white, Caucasian, and 30 to 40% non-white. So they're looking at, hey, students are going to associate with what they see when they walk in the classroom. How do we change this rather than waiting for the generational, cycle for it to come back around? But it's a growing organization that has focused on inclusion and looking at the basis of skill development and keeping connected with the industry and preparing students for the workforce they're living in. And that's been amplified even more by these projections over the last 5 to 10 years of, and you probably all heard it already, right? 9 billion by 2050, feed the 9, and now there's projections of, what is it, 12? I might be misquoted here. So 12 billion by 2100, or they're starting to make projections for the year 2100 now, and this reality starts to set in. Here we sit in 2017, high school students, 27 graduates 2018 through 2021 are, maybe another 4 years on for most of them, or it seems like so many of them that finish a graduate degree. They're 25 years into their career at 2050 with the responsibility of feeding 9.3 billion people or whatever. If they're a career person in any sector of the industry, well, if you put in 25 years, you're not a rookie at your position at that point. You're the one making some significant decisions that could have an impact on the industry. So those students that we're working with could be the ones making those decisions, and that's kind of it's an interesting conversation, and it causes some people to think, holy crap, are we preparing them for the jobs that we don't even know exist yet? And holy cow, are we doing it right? Are we doing right by the situation and preparing them the way we were supposed to?
So Matt, it sounds like you're in. What do you need from us?
Just that we're solid on continuing down that path, and at some point I think we bring you a more specific recommendation about what we think we could pull off. I think timeline wise, when you talk about planning and staging this out, I mean, if we can get it done and be ambitious, we'd like to have something to you at the program of studies time. Obviously we can update you in between that and in the interim, but program of studies time would be late fall, that October, November meeting, where we could come and say this is what we'd like to try to get off the ground.
It sounds like you're solid. That's going over that with interest, right? So
Yep.
So that's the thing is that I'd like to add is that we're still waiting on things like magnet schools. We know that when we talk about magnet schools, we had a report back from that committee. We looked at community partnerships, student interest, sustainability, cost, transportation issues. I think we need to make sure that before we're jumping into program of studies, that we make sure that there's interest in our student population, that there's drive in our student population. Because everything we do here is at what cost? Everything we do here is at what cost? And I think that Scott, really said, understanding that there's oftentimes 1 to 2 years worth of investigation and rollout, and we need to get the data, I think, first before we start jumping, because there's lots of opportunities to jump, and I think that this is a noble, very good organization to look into.
Well, that's one of the reasons that Clear Creek, Tim
Exactly.
contacted me, because they have had the the interest at the adult level to get it going, and they've struggled to have enough kids to have a viable program. And so when he found out we were interested in it, his thought process was perhaps there's enough student interest in Clear Creek, coupled with the student interest that we may have in the district, that we can work on merging forces there and trying to get it off the ground.
And with our discussions, and I guess that's an informal steering committee, with what we've met with already, that's one of that's a big component, is making sure that we're gauging the student interest and soliciting who's interested in this. But there's also been alluded to that, you know, it's a way to bring in homeschool opportunities, and we discussed too how many students that enroll outside of the district are going to areas, and many of them are going to schools, districts that have this ag programming that we don't. And is that a way to bring kids into our district as well? So definitely that's on our radar, and as far as getting community business partners and things like that. Talked with a representative of Surgenta here locally, and they're very interested in being involved with this. And like I say, there's community members from our homes, or I should say our farmers market and our backyard abundance, and different organizations that are locally growing food. They're very interested too. So. But and it is a process, and this is just the opening discussion and everything that way. So.
Sounds like you're good to go.
I have a question. Matt, so like at West High right now, there's a course called Environmental Sustainability. Could that be, I guess maybe I should be asking you guys, could that qualify as an ag course? Would that meet criteria?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, tonight in our board packet, we talked about sustainability. I think Brian was saying there's tremendous interest. A lot of our elementary schools have gardening clubs. I think it's something that we could build over time. I mean, on day one, there might not be a huge club, but it's something that could be built. But if we have courses that would already meet.
Right, we certainly look at that as part of that process too, to say, is there courses that can align to both? You know, maybe they're in our science sequence, or they're in another just elective sequence, and is it something that can, you know, almost count in both places, or provide a dual service that way?
Yeah, so maybe it wouldn't be as much of a cost increase as we initially think. I mean, I don't know. Do we need to have a lot of courses?
It's going to be the certificate. You know, how those courses line up, and then the credit type you can give them is oftentimes matched on instructor certification. So, you know, even if we have the course, the appropriate instructor then would have to potentially offer that for it to count as an ag appropriate course. So, you know, to Brian's point about before we get, you know, too far ahead and get to a program of studies point, I guess the thing we would need, Chris, is just at some point, you know, for you guys to ask us to come back and say, what's your progress? You know, what have you found out from student interest? What have you found out from community partners, from neighboring districts, and that we could provide you an update at that point to know if we're on the right path or if we need to slow down or
probably
speed up.
education committee, right?
Sure.
So it'd be
We can put it on one of those.
And this, and you know, it was alluded to, it's potentially a 2-year process in that, so we're just starting the journey.
Every once in a while, we just get the call, hey, we're starting one, or I see the opening on Teach Iowa, and, hey, more power to you, more power to you. That's great. But in more cases, often than not, it's about doing your homework, seeing who's out there that's interested. I think the tough thing with gauging student interest is for them, do they know what they don't know?
Right.
It's like when you get the question about that, do they even know what question they're answering when it's posed in front of them, if they've never been connected with it? And that could be said about any program option, any data collection process. Do they even know the question that they're answering when it's put in front of them? That's a debate I've had with our board of directors in terms of our annual report and data collection that we ask for from students in the program. It's just, we put the question in front of them, well, they don't even know what the gist of the question is. How can we expect to get a reliable answer from them? So I wish you the best of luck with that. I'm sure your experience has told you that that's always a constant challenge in terms of trying to work with that. At some point, somebody alluded to, sharing's been mentioned a few times. The nature of the 2080 agreement between the school districts really has no bearing on the status of the FFA chapter as it is chartered. How the school structures its Ag Ed program in order to open the door to offer the FFA opportunity is a local based decision. We don't have state policies that necessarily dictate how schools share to make a program possible if that's the avenue that they want to take a look at. It's interesting that the Poor Farm was brought up. I had somebody share an article in the Gazette with me today. I think Bridget saw it too, about the Johnson County Poor Farm and the decision that the Board of Supervisors is trying to look at. There's some official names for it. The field, it's a USDA grant program. I forget the name of it, but it has to do with schools growing their own food.
Right.
Using community gardens or high tunnels or greenhouses or whatever. So, and I was talking with Bridget earlier. Said I don't even know if the county as a public entity can partner with the school district as a public entity on something like that. Is that allowed or not? You never know. Federal this, that, and the other thing, I guess. But that could be a unique opportunity, and really from our demographic perspective too, is in a school district where you're looking at 3 high schools now, correct?
Mm-hmm. 4 if we have an alternative.
4, with your ACE program, what does that look like? And honestly, I have no data from the state that is going to help guide you in terms of what that looks like if you're going to launch something as an existence in every program. Des Moines has a central campus program. I had heard some rumors once upon a time of them looking at, do we add something in the grades 9, 10 at Hoover, that kind of thing. There's, needless to say, in the Des Moines metro area with DuPont Pioneer and John Deere in the backyard, there's some community interest in trying to push the likes of, say, Johnston or Ankeny, which Ankeny now 2 high schools. What would that look like? We're in Iowa, like I said, the culture's been a school district, a high school, a program. Our only exception to that is Western Dubuque, which has high schools at Epworth and Cascade, and they have 2 high schools, and each one has an FFA, Ag Ed FFA program. So,
all right, I want to thank you guys for coming. It sounds like we're off and rolling, and we'll come back to the education.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. I'll leave your business cards if you wish.
I want to thank you guys too, and Scott for assisting me with the convention. And I just wanted to let everyone know that Savannah did give a shout out to our district, the state convention from the podium that way. And so if it takes us 2 years to get our program going, when do you graduate?
3 years.
Well, keep an eye on those job openings.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is legislative priorities. Brian, you want to take that?
Yeah, so policy and governance, we talked our ledge priorities. As you might recall, we have to have these done by the end of July so we can submit them to the IASB. We had a number of different, we provided a link so you can listen to the discussion if you're interested, but one of the things that we found is 5 ledge priorities is a bit much when it comes to talking to legislators. 3 ledge priorities is about the minimum that we would like to go with. So we came up with 4, making sure that we are committed to pre-K funding, pushing for pre-K funding at the state level, and that includes transportation. And we talked a bit about transportation being a portion of that, how we word that into our ledge priorities, into our actual pamphlet and our cowboy cards is yet to be determined, but we want to make sure we're on the right path here. So we also, this is a sing-along, if you know the words timely and adequate funding. That is incredibly important every year for us, and the trend has not been great. The third thing is, of course, SAVE extension, which would be the extension of the 1 cent sales tax. And our 4th priority that we'd like to maybe offer for consideration, and this is one that we haven't covered in the 4 years that I've been on the board, but that would be ELL instruction. We are, I believe, 4th as far as number of students in the state in our population that are ELL students, and we've grown significantly, as we all know. I think it's 300% over the last 4 years, or maybe it's the other way around, 400% over the last 3 years. I can't remember one or the other. But there's 28,000 students, I believe, in the district or in the state that are ELL, and 1,400 of those students are here in our district. And so, committing to ELL support at the state level, we thought was important. So, we'd like to see, what the rest of the board has to say if we're on the right path there. But we'd like to take these 4 ledge priorities and start hammering out the wording for our cowboy cards and pamphlets. We can get that done by the end of July.
So what are we asking for with the increased allocation or? FTE.
We want to make sure that kids, research says that students, some students may require for 7 years.
Right. That's
So we
what I
want
was
to make
gonna
sure that we're giving our students the greatest opportunity to participate. That is a funding issue, but it's an eligibility issue too.
But are we asking for increased allocation or increased years?
Both.
Okay.
The
We're
UE
underfunded versus national average for,
We're underfunded on a per pupil basis, and we're under duration for the time students can spend in the program. So those are the two things.
because you might as well ask for both, why not? If you're doing it. Okay. To me, the first three were probably the most important, but ELL, I mean, it's taxation, ELL is a taxation, well, I don't know if you had the extra year. Can we spend money on ELL and still get,
We can petition for relief from the state through the SBRC, the State Budget Review Committee. So
even beyond the 5 years?
if they grant us up to 7, then we can petition for it. Right now, we can only petition through 5.
That's what I'm saying, so the 7
Right.
would allow us,
It would
so
allow-
some of this is a tax rate issue in that
Right.
we can pay more money, but
Right.
recoup but the 5 to 7 year thing would be, give us more.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
With the way the funding has changed, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Is ELL still an item, or is it like is it a silo in and of itself?
It still is a side.
Okay, so it's
Yep.
not put into the whole pile anymore?
No.
Or, yeah.
No, if you weren't number 4 in the state, then you had fewer kids, and those kids had lower needs, and you were mustering them out in a year or two, you might be the rare district out there that had a surplus. Most districts in the state do not carry a surplus in ELL. That was what you're asking, right? That was the wavelength I was getting.
Yeah, I'm getting at,
Can you roll those extra funds into the general fund idea?
yeah, well, no, is it worth asking for? If
Oh.
it's all gonna be one big pile of money anyway, and we just spend it how we
Right.
spend it,
Right.
then,
Now, if that stays inside their
It's worth asking
category.
for more.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, and one other thing is that we also anticipate there will be uniformity or interest from other UEN districts when it comes to these priorities. We don't want to be out on a limb carrying our flag for something that nobody else is, because there's more power in numbers, right?
And EL is being a big issue in the UEN just because of the number of students that you find in those 17 districts.
Steve's heard me harp on PAB or on the PAB thing for so long, but we don't think we can generate enough interest anywhere else for property assessment appeals board. So
All right, anything else on that one?
not very sexy.
All right, great, thanks for the, sounds like we'll all for the
Okay.
Transportation Committee.
That's just it. Brian, do you want to shoot those to me? We've got them drafted in any kind of language, and you and I go back and forth on those, and we can get them out to everybody to take a look at.
Sure.
All right?
I'm going to walk you through some of the highlights of the transportation memo we have here for you tonight. The first piece is we just put in the definitions of the different busing types there because I know our verbiage gets a little confusing sometimes when we're talking about the different pieces. And then we have several recommendations there for you that came from the Transportation Committee's work. The first is the elementary busing recommendation. I know Joan talked to you about some of these the last time she presented, so if there's some information I forget to include or if we have some questions go in depth, we'll both do our best to answer those questions. But first bullet there is to maintain the existing 12 attendance support busing routes. And then the second piece to try to target beyond those 12 attendance support busing routes is to begin a new pilot of attendance support transportation for students who have identified attendance barriers. So if they're having problems getting to school and we've determined that's an issue, then trying to pilot, you see some allocation there for cab fare and some innovative ways to try to get those students to school other than just busing. The secondary recommendation includes continuing the current discretionary busing for 17-18. I think ideally we would want to try to match those terms up, that if we have attendance support busing at the elementary, we want to try to use the same terminology secondary. That's just going to take some additional time to look at that and try to analyze any spots we might have overlapped or that don't that no longer make sense with new attendance areas. That wasn't a big focus of the committee this year. The second point there is to begin a new pilot to expand the bus program and try to provide bus passes for students that are having problems attending school or lack of attendance at school. The pay-to-ride recommendation is to maintain the pay-to-ride routes as in existence there. I know you guys received a lot of feedback over the week about the activity busing recommendation, so I'll explain what we have on there and then what's noticeably not on there and why it's not there. We would like to begin a new pilot of morning and evening activity bus for North Central and Northwest Junior High. You see the cost detailed there. And at the junior highs, if you remember some of the feedback from the committee, is it's a little bit easier for us to target activity times. You do a beginning and an end stop to those activities as far as when they begin and when they stop, and they're all in the same, are all relatively on the same campus for those schools. So we think we would target out a bus and try the bus. Obviously, if there's a cheaper available option, we would look to pursue that. But right now, we would want to be transparent with you on the cost that we would think that would be a bus to try to support those students. We also put in some costs there for pilots of family transportation for concerts and games. So if families are at a hardship in getting to those events at those further away schools and in those attendance areas, we would try to provide that support. And then new pilot for supervision of students. We also think that, you know, anytime you have a bus with activities or for students waiting around while they're possibly waiting for that bus to arrive, or if they've been dropped off early and their practice doesn't quite start, that's going to take some additional staff time and supervision. The piece that isn't on there is the Kirkwood students at Liberty High School. And Joan can speak to some of this too, but part of the challenge we had when we looked at the high school is the amount of activities and knowing which students will participate in which activities. So the intention or I think the viewpoint of the committee was not that that's not important or not something we should try to, that we shouldn't try to problem solve. It's just there wasn't a way to really accurately portray either a recommendation or a cost to you at this time, because we don't know what students will be in what activities, what time of day that will be, what kind of support they would like to receive, and how we can do that. So in some sense, I think we need to come back to you when we have some more of that data and when we can try to better target what that looks like. We just weren't comfortable saying we think you should spend this much money on a bus when we're not at all sure that it will be a bus, or that it will be a bus all year, or a bus maybe for this activity but not this one. So there's just so many variables in that high school equation with student participation and the amount of activities and the times those activities run, that it was really hard to put anything on paper for what a cost might look like there. So I think unless Joan thinks I'm misspeaking, the committee's supportive of trying to problem solve that situation. It just wasn't able to be quantified in a sense.
So what are next steps in Rowan?
So next steps, you see overall cost
Just
for
on the activity bus.
Oh, for the activity bus? Well, I think next steps for the activity bus would be to, as we begin that school year, we try to make sure that we're very committed to those Kirkwood families and
What's the problem?
Identify those students in
What's
those
the problem with
activities.
saying we're going to do a pilot of some sort? We just don't know what it is yet.
Right, and that's the thing where I said we're probably remiss in not putting that on the memo or making that statement that we will do some type of a pilot.
Okay.
There just wasn't a cost that could be quantifiable.
I think we get that part. It's
Okay.
Well, and if I could jump in with one possible suggestion is that I don't think we'll have a full bus for North Central either, just because the numbers are a little smaller. So if we could maybe relook at the policy of having junior high and high school kids on the same bus, we might be able to do a little double dipping on
Yeah,
that.
right.
But right now, that's not our policy. What's that?
Oh, I was like, yes, I already
Yeah, so
Sorry,
the
I
cost
stole your thunder.
cost might be there if we're able to do that. If we kind of rethink 712 and it's an activity bus that runs that area and does North Central and Liberty High School, that can help problem solve that situation.
I'll check with everybody, but if we're committed to do a pilot, we just don't know what it is, that's different than.
Then nothing,
Yeah.
right?
No, I think the committee fully supports trying to get the high school kids there too. It's just a bus isn't the solution. It's probably
Oh, sure.
a combination of things.
Want something more flexible, probably.
Right. Yeah, it's because the bus is not. It stops and starts at the same time. In high school, just the gym space alone makes my head swim looking at that schedule.
So I just like to go back to our board's discretionary busing recommendation, the transportation renewal that was well over a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
The wording was to eliminate discretionary busing. And I am all in for attendance support busing. But if we eliminated discretionary busing that had existed for years due to a myriad factors that the people could no longer remember why there was busing provided to an area. I still have David Duty's printouts of all the from January of 2015 that have all the maps of all the areas, secondary, elementary, whatever, that had discretionary busing. And I'm curious why, was it $294,000 on discretionary busing at the secondary level? Why, if the board said we're going to eliminate discretionary busing, why we're doing that?
And how much of that would be?
How much can we use for support for activity busing, funding the activity busing programs, if we're just doing attendance support busing at the secondary level, as opposed to, once upon a time there was no sidewalk here.
And I guess another way of asking that question is, do we currently have areas where people do not qualify for attendance support busing, or elementary school, there's no discretionary busing, or then they get it back when they're secondary students?
I believe that's why we need to look at that further. I think that was part of what happened, is that situation has presented itself, or to Brian's point, that maybe we did discretionary busing for a period of time, and does it still make sense to do that discretionary busing? I think the committee's hesitation would have been to say, let's pull all that away and try to come back with attendance support busing without having maybe the appropriate amount of time to dig into that once we determined that that was an issue. So before we can just get rid of discretionary busing and make it attendance support busing, we need to be able to answer all those questions and make sure we're not losing anybody in the fold.
And the committee did discuss discretionary busing for Grant Wood going to city or to Southeast, because that's a large route that we would definitely want to maintain, because the kids who were bused to Southeast didn't have attendance issues, but the same kids who aren't bused to city did have attendance issues.
Right.
So that would be one that we flip to attendance support.
So for me, part of the evolution of the the transportation renewal, is no longer to have discretionary busing, but to have activity and attendance support. Right.
Right.
Okay. Because I just know when I look at these, there's actually a map that stops like 2 houses shy of mine, and I can tell you right now that there's no students that are secondary living in that neighborhood, but there could very easily be at some point, and they don't.
Right.
There's not going to be attendance support problems.
Right.
We don't need them.
Right.
To be spending that. Okay.
So, matters, Steve, real quick, can you tell me what extracurricular activities such as football and I assume cross country will be off-site at Liberty next year in the fall?
Yeah, I'd feel more comfortable coming back with a list after talking to Scott. I know he's still working on practice locations for every piece. I think cross country, they probably plan to start from the school and, run from there. Football will be, I don't know, Dwayne, if you have perspective on that, if they're planning to do football in any of those fields, or if that one's definitely going to be off-site.
We have a field ready for football practice at Van Allen.
Van Allen,
And
okay.
where the softball field's almost ready, but that's a spring sport.
Yeah.
And the same field will be used for soccer.
And that's part of the challenge with the secondary piece too, is the multiple locations for the high school, so that was why it was harder to project.
So fall football will practice at Van Allen and we'll play at?
Well, Van Allen and North Central is the way I understand they may play there as well. We've got a nice football field there.
They'll play there.
I don't know if they're going to play their games there, but there'll be certainly be practice there.
They use the space.
I guess what I was getting at, I guess more is like, those sports will start, or I've already started doing stuff now in the summer, so, the quicker we can get on top of this, the more comfortable I would feel about it.
Are we looking into that? Are we currently checking?
Yeah, we tried to see if there was any interest at Northwest when baseball and softball started, and we had a bus ready to run, and there was no student interest for those sports at that time. So as we approach these summer months, I know Esme's been working closely with Scott to say if we have some students that need to be transported from that area, we can look at that. So we'll make sure we revisit that right away here in the coming days and see if there's any issues that are presenting themselves. But we did that with those summer sports to try to, we just didn't have any students that were going to participate.
And the other thing that we're working on is we have the 7th grade prep program. So we have the Alexander kids who go to Northwest, and then the Kirkwood kids going to Liberty. And we didn't get a huge response initially, but we're personally calling all of them and saying, we will have a bus to take you from the Alexander area to northwest, you really should consider this. And we're going to enlist some of our interpreters to make the calls, just because I think there may be some language barriers there too. And that would also give them introduction to what extracurricular activities are available, because that's part of the curriculum for the prep program. So I'm hoping that will be another way to promote this and get people on board. And then similarly, it gets really complicated for the 9th grade prep, since it's out west until Liberty opens, and how we're going to work all that transportation in. Still scratching my head a little bit.
So, like in the case of marching band, the kids have already enrolled in their classes. We know who's going to be in band next year at Liberty. Seems to me it'd be pretty easy to put those on a map and say, okay, those that live here, let's call them, find out if they can, because marching band starts a week before school. If we wait till school starts, it's too late.
The only issue is, so you have marching band kids, you're going to have football kids, you have cross-country kids. So to try to problem solve one of those situations,
Yeah, I understand.
it's trying to group them together to say, okay, now that we know everybody, what's our best way to try to problem solve this? Are we going to have to problem solve marching band differently than we're going to have to problem solve, football or cross-country? And, what do we bring to you guys so you know what you're biting off in that sense too, for, if it's 3 different modes of transportation for 3 different activities, or are we going to just commit to this is running at this time, and you're going to, practices are either going to have to change or you potentially miss part. I don't think we want to presume we know any of those options yet, but like you said, there's some information we can start to
That's all
draw
I
on
meant.
over the
It's
summer.
just that there's
Yep.
some information
Yep.
that we have today that we can just pull.
Sure can.
Is there anything else you need from us tonight?
Well, the only thing I didn't go through on the memo then is the overall cost, and it, at some point, I guess if we're committed to this, whatever the board action needs to look like for you guys, or if you're supportive of us moving forward with it, but you see the overall cost, 16, 17, and then the projected cost we have for you there, not including any transportation to Liberty High School
Is it an issue
and
versus
West
the
High
budget?
School. What?
Is it an issue versus the budget? If it's in line with the budget, there's no action required.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously an increase, so any kind of increase, is something I think I can't alone make a decision on, but, it's an increase in dollars, and we've talked about our budget scenario before, so, but if it's something you guys are supportive of, I think that's part of our team's responsibility, is to make sure we work it into the budget.
You're saying it's an increase in the year-to-year budget?
Right, so last year, we tried our best to project out, that's what we spent on transportation. This year, with the assumptions we put there in front of you, we tried to be very conservative, again, assuming a bus when maybe we can do something cheaper. We're looking at about $100,000, roughly $120,000 more dollars on transportation.
I'll just repeat what I said at the board table. We made the boundaries, and I'm committed to making this transportation happen. So,
So many people are worried about it. Can we schedule another just update on this? Because the sooner, like Paul said, the sooner there's progress on this, especially the Kirkwood issue. The better, and people feel like they've heard something.
What about that? I'm not telling you where to put it, I guess, but the 2nd July meeting would be maybe a nice time, knowing that August is around the corner, and what's that going to look like for fall and school at that point. That we could come back. That, give us some time to
We'd already
some of
asked
that
Frank to
existing
deliver
data.
some information on the number of routes that would be traveling to each of the schools at that point in time, so I think we could just add that to it.
We'll have some idea, I think we should have some idea by then, what would be paid to private disposal, wouldn't we? It's kind of,
By July 22nd, you may have some.
maybe, okay.
Just to clarify one thing, so the junior high activities bus, is that limited to the Alexander Kirkwood neighborhood, or is that going to be for anybody who needs the activities bus? Is that
It would be limited
much
to those
longer?
areas.
Okay, just wasn't clear to us. Maybe I didn't close that.
Limited to areas that, like, student family advocates have.
I think for right now, we were looking at Alexander and Kirkwood
Sure.
as being the pilots.
Well,
One,
the reason I'm saying is that Alexander's geographic draw is a much larger area than, say, Kirkwood's.
Right, we talked about drop off for that area may involve several stops,
Okay.
where Kirkwood's may involve, fewer stops in that
And-
sense. But we wouldn't be expanding beyond those elementary attendance areas for any activity busing. It would just be primarily to those 2 elementary areas.
So my request, since you brought it up, would be to see the all-in transportation dollars when we do this review.
Well, we could probably,
Because you're trying to tell me it's an increase, which I don't believe, but I understand what you're saying now. It's an increase on these categories.
Right.
Is it an increase on total transportation?
that we likely would have a better idea than when Craig brings back those transportation numbers, because he'll have number of routes per school.
Oh, right.
And so
Right.
we'll have
It
a
all-
cost with that, so you'll be able to see that all in piece.
Otherwise,
Let's do apples to apples.
right.
I would love to see that for 15, 16 too, just to get a sense of what happened after we
Change.
cut the discretionary busing.
15, 16.
Well, and with the addition of,
Well, I'm just
That-
looking at that,
right, the bus area, the Liberty and the change there.
Yeah, but just to see sort of what the
So trend on the total
pluses
transportation.
and minuses.
Yeah, so when you take these factors along with all your regular routes, what's the actual cost?
What you're really doing.
Right.
So the discretionary busing for secondary, is that a change that we could make effective August? Or are you saying we need?
I think discretionary busing is something we need to work on next
I would
year,
do that.
secondary wise.
You
Yeah.
want to give people a year's, like,
Yeah.
months notice, months of notice.
I think that's year 2 of this transportation committee's work. I think we really tried to focus on that activity busing piece and attendance support help we can provide. And I think now year 2 of this committee needs to look at how do we, kind of to Brian's point, line up what we've done to elementary to the
I
secondary.
know you're still calling it discretionary busing, but I got to dust the tapes off that discussion. I thought it was because we had attendance concerns in those areas, but
Right.
Well, I wonder if there's any way, maybe there's not, if you could give us a sense of, you know, what the secondary discretionary busing minus the likely secondary attendance support busing, what that remaining number would be. Maybe it's not a big number. You know, maybe most of the discretionary busing is actually going to be attendance support busing, and that would be reassuring to know that it's not costing us a ton.
And we thought there was a substantial number of that going on existing, so that's why I was gonna, if we're gonna make any kind of change there, it's gonna take some time to dig into.
all right,
I
so.
think it's easy, I don't know, maybe I'm oversimplifying, but you look at the route, you see where it's picking up. If it's picking up in neighborhoods such as off of Camp Cardinal Boulevard, where it sounds like the one is going, seems to me that tells you the property value in that area is not one that would require attendance support.
I mean, could you assume that if it's an area required for elementary school, it will probably require it for secondary?
I'd need a little help to know how to tease out Alexander, because I don't know if this number includes the discretionary bus from Alexander to Nancy to Southeast currently.
We were told it does not,
Oh, okay.
that they're not permitted. Steve just responded to that email just a few days ago that they're not permitted to write that to Southeast.
They're not permitted, but this 294,000 might
So-
include what's currently discretionary to city. See, because, you know, all of this gets a little more complicated because we're changing. There's going to be different mandatory busing
Sure.
versus attendance busing. You know, I mean, it gets complicated.
But if we, like Chris said, if we teased it out already at the elementary level,
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I would assume that teenagers would be more capable of getting there than elementary students. All things equal.
Mhm.
All right, so bring it back second meeting in July work session.
So, just so I'm clear on what we're bringing back, we want to see the actual cost from Craig about overall transportation numbers, and then we also want to have that activity busing piece fleshed out for Liberty High School when we come back in July.
Yes, and Craig and I separately kind of committed to bring back all the proposed routes.
All the routes anyways. Okay.
Which is why that time should have worked.
Right.
All right, great. Well, thanks again, Joe. It's always good. So I know we picked on the one part that was kind of undefined, but I mean, it's great work and supporting our kids.
This one's been a challenging one.
Well, I think as long as we stay committed, I think sometimes we're not going to know that, you know, you want to have the option of something, but we're not going to know it until we get in there and really understand. It's just like the FFA. What is the interest and what's really there? All right, awesome. Next, time frame for agenda items. Lori, did you want to start that one?
Oh, sure. Sorry. Yeah, so there's been a number of times when we've had attachments show up less than 48 hours prior to the board meeting, attachments that were available to us before then. the climate study report, for example, I'm just pulling a couple out here. Climate study report was done in April. We got it, I think, between 24 and 48 hours before the meeting. On this agenda, we had the Hanover report that the board members received, but the general public didn't get access to it until about, I don't know, 28 hours before the meeting or so. I've done some talking with other government entities about how that's handled elsewhere. And what I've been told is that in other areas, and I know we're all different, but it's considered the department has responsibility to give that to, in this case, the superintendent, and other entities it would be somebody else. But and if it's not provided, when the board packet comes out, or the council packet, or whatever you're calling it for that entity, then that agenda item is not on the agenda. And I guess I would like us to discuss, I mean, I know that there's, sometimes we read things and then we have questions, and then that's a different situation. But when we have reports that were, they, you know, we're in our hands, I don't know why they aren't in the packet. So,
Can I just, I mean, I'm agreeing a lot with what you're saying. I think there's a lot of different ways you can handle it. I understand that staff must feel like, well, you know, you asked for it, I got to give it to you, and it took some longer than we thought, but I still want to give it to you, which is fine. I think we should be more open to just saying, we appreciate that you got it to us at all, but maybe since if time is not of the essence, we can just hold it over. The problem, I guess, is if something really is time sensitive, that causes a different issue. But I think we should be more open to just saying, look, we just got this yesterday, give us a little more time.
You know, one thing that might, just from a structural standpoint, that we might want to think about is we moved to having our agendas posted on Wednesday, which I think is a great idea because it gives everybody, it gives board members and community members a lot of advance time to go through what is often a very deep agenda. But by default, because there's only 5 days between, like if you said, I want something on the July 11th agenda, we have 5 work days to get that ready so that it can be posted to the agenda. The staff is great. I'll be honest with you, I think we overpromise and underdeliver because we're trying to meet your expectations. I think we would be far better off to recognize that 5 days in almost every instance is completely unrealistic. So when we start thinking about drafting ideas for additional agendas, which we did a great job on tonight, we said, that sounds like a second board meeting in July. That sounds like a work session in August. I was very comfortable as we were going through, and I keep a running list of those things that we need to do. I was very comfortable with this list, even with the idea that it's summer, we're gonna have conflicting vacation schedules and whatnot. We can meet all of those expectations. It's where we get an agenda item that says, hey, it's the second board meeting here, we wanna have it the first board meeting the next month, and we wind up with that 5-day turnaround. In an attempt to meet your expectations, again, I think there's some overpromising, under-delivering. Yeah, we will try to get it done. And I think part of that has developed because of a acceptance of posting the agenda item and having that ready on Wednesday, but perhaps not having the attachments ready till Thursday or Friday, or sometimes Monday. So I think if we looked at it from the standpoint of when an agenda item is posted, it should have all the attachments with it, then we can do a better job when you say, hey, can I have this? If the team knows that this needs to be posted on that Wednesday with the attachment, we're going to be far less likely to say, yeah, I'm going to try to get that done for you. Knowing that I think many of our team members are like, I can get that by Friday. Can't get it by Wednesday when it has to be posted, but I'm pretty sure I can get that by Friday. And I think that sometimes then we wind up with things that roll over into Monday. Well, now it's 24 hours or less before you're trying to read it. So I think if we are more real, if we know that it has to be attached, we're gonna be more realistic about it's got to be in by Monday. I can't get it to you in 5 days. I'm gonna ask for that to be not next meeting, but the meeting after that.
I mean, if it were me, I would say, you know, maybe more often we could leave it, listen, get it to us as soon as reasonably can. Let's put it on the agenda in case we feel like we can discuss it. If it turns out you can't get it to us till the day before the meeting, give it to us then. Maybe we'll decide to carry it over. But maybe we'll be ready to discuss it, you know, I mean, it just sort of gives you more options if you just give it to us when you get it.
Yeah, I think if I can tell the crew that if you cannot get me that agenda item by Wednesday, don't volunteer to put that on the agenda. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. Let's make sure that if the agenda item's going to be on there, that you have everything ready to go for that. And if that means that you need until that following 2 Wednesdays to do that, then let's speak up and tell you that, so that
Right.
you're not left in this awkward position of looking at your agendas every 15 minutes to see if things have showed up on there that you're waiting for, or me
Exactly.
sending emails out to try to remind you to, hey, take a look at that type of thing.
Studebaker's statement was deliver more than you promise.
Mm-hmm.
Or that was their company motto. But yeah, I think it's perfectly within your and the staff's right to say, hey, if we want to discuss this at the next board meeting and you don't think you can have it ready, to say, hey,
Well,
it's gonna take us more time.
and to Chris's point, if it looks like it's not going to be ready to go, I can send you a note on Wednesday before posting saying, hey, we had report X that we thought was going to be on there. I've talked to the team, it's not ready to go. I'm going to move that to the next agenda with a guarantee that that'll be on there. And we'll even, in that case, then we can send the report out to you early. You know, if we're going to have it by, Tuesday, the day of the next board meeting, there's no reason we can't send that out to you, and then it's ready to go, so that the minute we post it, it's already on there and ready to go.
So just looking at this, board docs is a great thing because you don't have to send out a 400-page PDF file every time like you used to have to do. But it's also created this a little bit in that an ad gets done, 24 hours or sometimes 4 hours before the board meeting. And I will tell you, I think Director Rowland and I are going to agree on this. That's a problem. I
It's a
can't.
transparency problem. I mean, it's a
Well,
problem for
no.
me to review it, but to community, it looks like we're hiding something.
The transparency thing is, I would say, 24 hours in advance notice, for sure. But
Yeah, what I'm hearing
but
from people is they need.
what I'm talking about, please, what I'm talking about is during
Right,
our
they
day,
need more
being
than-
able to step away and, oh, great, something was added, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I don't have the ability to review this.
Right.
It's 100 pages,
Right.
or it's a 57-page report, and it's like, the meeting's at 6, and
Yeah.
I don't even know if I'm gonna get out of here until 5.
Yeah.
So that's, I think that's a huge thing. And I do recognize that we moved from Thursday agenda posting to Wednesday agenda posting, and I mean, for me, it would be somewhere by 24, 48 hours. I mean, I'd like to have it Sunday before, I mean, no,
Let's
it's
try
20, 40
this.
hours before, but something better than showing up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Try this, it's either ready for Wednesday.
Yeah.
Well, when you make a commitment, it's ready for Wednesday, and it's not, we'll kick it to.
Right.
I think we should just watch out for situations where, let's say, the second meeting in July, this thing must be acted upon.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Nice to be able to talk about it at the first meeting of July,
Sure.
even if the thing's not ready. I would still rather have that agenda item be on the first meeting in July, so that we're not figuring it all out on that last meeting. So the time-sensitive ones are the hard ones.
Well, and those might be the kinds of things where if we know that there's something that you need that's on the agenda that really is time sensitive, if we can look at something else on the agenda and say, not as time sensitive, then we can make sure that, knowing that we want it posted with the agenda on that Wednesday, we might time shift something else to that second meeting to make sure you have what you need for that first meeting, and maybe even get you a draft copy of it or something like that, so that you have something to discuss, something to look at, well prior to the board meeting itself.
Can we get this in some kind of language and post it on our school board? I mean, seriously, because what happens is we have changing of hands in a couple of months, and then people are making their demands. I'm not saying it's a policy, but just to be clear about why we're doing this way, because we're trying to prevent getting this out, and then a staff has to readjust to a whole new group of people that are, changing their minds about some of that stuff. So I'm just trying to see how we can put that on our page so that the public understands that if we don't have it, it's not that the administrators are the worst people ever, it's just that they weren't able to get to it. Because that's the other part, if we're gonna have we want this, then we have to have some give on this end of saying they weren't able to do it, it's not a lack of competence, they just weren't able to do it. And so I think that's helpful in having that reciprocal relationship about the decision being made about how we move forward about board docs and how they be posted.
And specifically, again, the reports that I cited were ones that were available. I'm not sure why they weren't put on board docs. I mean, we had the Hanover one in our email, but it didn't show up in board docs till the day before the meeting. So
because they're requesting it.
The climate study report, same thing. Actually, we didn't have that one, but thank you, Brian, for requesting it. But the climate study, we didn't, I mean, that's a significant report that I'm speaking for myself here. I had to read and digest and come up with questions overnight. And I need more time than that.
Mhm.
I would ideally like to do what you're suggesting.
Yeah, you want 3 or 4 days.
Board
Well, if
packet complete
your
for next
your
agenda.
weekend's busy and you can't do it, if it doesn't show up until Friday afternoon, that's of no help to you. You know, right?
Well, and too, with our summer schedule, this place closes up Thursday. So even if it's released on Wednesday, you don't check it until the next day. You've got a question that's Monday before it's going to get acted upon. And on that point too, just doing the financials during the summer months, I don't know if there's a possibility to get in on Fridays if they're janitorial staff or something like that, just to do out of the books, just to have a little more flexibility.
Check with Craig on that.
Because I can get busy too, trying to come in and do those audits. If there was time, just when there's somebody in the building, that would be helpful.
I do want to say, though, that I acknowledge what Director Levy is saying, that there would be times that, if it is time sensitive, that we might want to have a little discussion,
Mhm.
but then know that the next meeting we're having the big
Sure.
discussion.
Sure.
So
So that we don't.
will that confuse the public though? 'Cause will
Well,
they
the
have an
alternative is
expectation?
we have a subpar discussion.
But that's one of the beauties of board docs, is there's no reason in the description section that you couldn't say, on July 11th, we will have a discussion-only format for this topic with the expectation that it will be on the agenda on July 22nd with attachments to follow or something like that. So it'd be very easy for people who are taking a look at it to understand, we're going to talk about it on the 11th, we're going to look at whatever the attachments are on the 22nd, and then we'll know that they'll be out there on that Wednesday. I think
So
we
would,
could-
would that be a little, I'm wondering about is that backwards a little bit, because like we won't have the information, then we're just kind of throwing out opinions versus having data, et cetera, so we would kind of be,
Might depend on the issue. There might be some issues that you want to share more questions with us, and we can make sure that we get those ready. That might be one.
I mean, I understand in that regard, but many times it's, we need the information to have the discussion versus we're just having a discussion, it's just our opinions, and we're talking, and then that's being reported out to the community as though that's fact, but we don't have the facts, and then we get the facts, and then we have to retract half of the discussion because we didn't know really what was going on. I mean, as a board, we can make the decision about how we want to do it. I'm just saying, I think that that could be confusing for folks, and it'll make us look a little bit like we don't know which direction we're going.
I think there are certain presentations too that, well, the climate survey one, it would not have felt good that night to say, well, let's carry this over for 2 weeks because we had the people there.
Right.
Right. So that was maybe just better to either have it by Wednesday or
Mhm.
not.
All right, anything else on this one? All right, next, facilities master plan, anything we need to discuss?
I don't think so right now.
Once, twice. Geotech, anything we need to discuss? There's a
You
dash
had one
graph.
chart you wanted to share.
Yeah, well, I just, that was one of the questions that was out there, was whether or not we could put those, what looked like an incredibly difficult to visualize spreadsheet into a chart that was perhaps a little bit easier to see. So that was our stab at it.
It's easy to read.
At what point are we optimally efficient in our buildings as far as?
In terms of dealing with the road, yeah, we'd like to be 90 to 95%.
Okay.
Say that again?
90 to 95%.
Too high. It's too high.
Before,
I know.
before
Too
I,
high.
I mean,
It's too high. So
we've argued about this, as you can tell.
Anytime you're talking space utilization, no way.
I just look at, we've spent so many years running over 100%. If I could be 90 to 95%.
Oh, I understand.
I'd be
it
pretty
just,
happy.
it seems that once I had heard 85 to 95%.
85 to 95 would be ideal long run for us. We've got to wait until we get there.
But I also heard that the capacity numbers themselves had that little instrument. Is that not right?
Well,
No.
actually, when we did that, it assumes a plus or minus 10%. That was the ideal. You could go down to 90 or you could go to 110. So that's how that number, we looked at that number. So if the capacity of Alexander is 500, you could go to 550 without negatively impacting that building. You'd have room to expand in the classrooms. And you could go down to 450 and still have a very efficient building. Does that make sense?
90 to 100.
I'm sure on a by school basis, but then you sum up the district.
And I'm talking about optimal operational efficiency.
You really want to average 85 to 90.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree, but that's how that capacity number was set up.
It's just if you don't have that, you don't have any ability to handle any variation, right? I mean, if you're up at 95% utilization, almost half your schools are going to be over capacity, right? I mean, it's almost like being at 100.
Yeah.
Then you got grade to grade variation, you get school to school variation. And there's always more needs. We got needs for pre-K, we got needs for ELL, we got.
That's really important. Our buildings more than anything.
Yeah.
So my takeaway is there will be 0 empty rooms in 2020. In fact, we're going to be tight on space. All right.
What's misleading about this chart, though, is that it's lumping together large groups. So you could, within attendance zone, have an elementary that's crazy over and another one that's under. And unless we change boundaries, it's not 95%, it's 105 and 70.
It sounds crazy, but there are school districts that look at boundaries every other year and make adjustments for that very reason.
Don't suggest that, please.
No, I'm just telling you, it happens.
Well, or we could just not list it as a big
Yeah.
group, because it implies something that's not true. I see the small ones, but when you
Yeah.
see the other numbers, it tells a story that is not really quite.
And a little bit more realistic at the secondary
Oh,
level.
what's not the truth?
21.
Because there'll be some schools that might be over 100%.
Because you're looking at a
And
pen
when you
on
say
here.
we're 85% for the whole district,
I'm just reacting to the truth. Truth,
What's that?
it's the data.
I think it could be easily misunderstood.
Sure, I agree.
I'm not sure it's, if we want to build trust, I'm not sure we want to put things out that are easily misunderstood. I would suggest, in my personal opinion, being very transparent.
All right, anything else on this topic? Entertained motion to adjourn? So moved. Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned.